You are listening to Jai Long, and this is Make Your Break, episode 102. Hey, today I have the biggest name in wedding photography here joining me, Jose Villa, all the way from the US. If you've ever wondered who shot Justin Bieber's wedding, I know I have actually wondered that, and this is the man, Jose Villa. Here he is. Hey, so I'm here with Jose Villa at the moment, and I've been admiring his work for years since I started wedding photography. And I actually got to meet him, I think back probably in 2015 in California when I went over there to talk at Photo Field Trip. It was just brief, but it's so good because I love shooting film. And so I've admired Jose for so long because of all his film work and the incredible things that he gets to do. And I would say he's probably, in my eyes, one of the most accomplished wedding photographers in the world. So I'm so humbled and so thankful that he's here to talk to us today and bring some insight. So, hey, Jose, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing good. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so good to have you on here. I'm also really excited that you're talking at the Wedding Photography Summit coming up.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm super excited about that. I've been hearing about it here for the last year or two.
It's going to be so much fun. We think it's going to be the biggest workshop in the world, and yeah, having people like yourself bring in so much knowledge to the newer people, like people that are just starting out and stuff. I think it's so important for them to um, just to get inspired and to listen to all the stories and how, I guess, like how you have navigated through the industry for as long as you have as well.
Yeah, no, I'm an open book. I love to share. I host my own workshops as well, but I love to just be out there and make sure that if I can give some piece of advice to somebody and they can take it and make a little bit of money or save some time, that's what's really important to me.
So let's dive straight in. I want to get my listeners to know you a little bit more before the summit. So I actually want to dive in into more of the real stuff and just ask you, like, how did you make your break when you first started out in the wedding photography industry, and why was the wedding industry right for you?
Yeah, well, I've been photographing for, oh my goodness, about 18 or so years. And, from the very beginning, when I first started to get into wedding or into photography, I should say, I've always really liked the idea of photographing weddings. And, back then, it wasn't really such a fun thing to do, but I started my thing. I started just sort of assisting people. I started working with other folks too, doing commercial work in San Francisco, fashion work, and all of that. And I realized that coming from a small town, I didn't want to be in a big city, and I wanted to be my own boss. I didn't want anybody to be telling me what to do. So, because I had grand ideas of how I wanted to photograph. And I decided to come back here to this small little town called Solving, which is where I grew up in California. And I just did little portraits, here with little portraits with families, with children, things like that. And but my ultimate goal was to photograph weddings. I finally got that inquiry to do a wedding, and I was kind of scared but excited at the same time. And I did it, and I shot it all on film. I'm mostly a film photographer. I've recently picked up a digital camera over the last year, actually 2 years or so. But starting with photographing with weddings, it made me really nervous to know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I was just sort of telling people to walk over there, and then I would gather my thoughts and figure out how to photograph. But I started with a really really good client, and that client just started to refer me, and it just sort of started like a lot of the companies, a lot of the photographers out there that are listening. But one of my biggest breaks, I think, was when I got a chance to photograph Martha Stewart, her niece's wedding. If people know who Martha Stewart
Wow.
is, she's an incredible designer, and of course has had her magazines, and it's just a huge empire. Um, but one of my favorite magazines was Martha Stewart Weddings, and so they called me to photograph her niece's wedding in Las Vegas, believe it or not. And I thought, oh, in Las Vegas, like that's interesting. How are we going to make a Martha Stewart wedding look beautiful in Las Vegas? Well, of course, leave it to Martha Stewart to make it
Mm.
look beautiful. And so I photographed that wedding. I was teamed up with her designers and with her stylists, and I got a chance to work right beside them. And I learned a lot about styling. I learned a lot about just little tricks, about photographing with invitations and all the details and what type of even lighting they like. So that was really great. And so then the images came out in the magazine. I had, I think, maybe like a 6-page spread. And from that, I started to get inquiries for those types of weddings. And then the magazine would call me again and they'd say, hey, we have another wedding for you, but this time it's bigger and we have a bigger budget. And so then the magazine was actually hiring me to photograph these particular weddings. So they became my client. And then my
Wow.
name was attached to all of these beautiful weddings, and even covers of the magazine. So that was a really beautiful break. And, I can tell you 20 different breaks, but I think that was one of my first breaks that kind of got me to that next level.
Can we like back up a little bit? Because I know there's a lot of listeners going like, well, I don't think Martha Stewart's going to be reaching out to me to shoot anytime soon. Like, obviously it wasn't luck. Like, let's be honest. Like, you obviously were putting in the work and they took notice of what you were doing. Like, tell me about the process, like leading up to that, because obviously if you were just starting out, like that would have been the most nerve-wracking thing you could possibly do, be surrounded by Martha Stewart's stylists and possibly even other photographers and things like that. So yeah, tell me how you got up to that point of when Martha Stewart would actually reach out to you.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So that was
Mm.
probably, I would say, maybe 7 or 8 years into my business. So definitely, I can talk
Okay.
about how that happened, but it's not going to happen overnight. I like that you're bringing that back a little bit because that is the reality. Also, the reality is that I really was sort of just working 24/7, photographing as many weddings, editing as many weddings as possible, getting them out and published as much as possible, to be seen by whomever would be interested. And because of that, and because I was
Yeah.
submitting my weddings, the market or the industry is so different today. But I would submit my weddings to all these magazines, and I would get a lot of no's, no, 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 not good enough, not good enough. But the few that I did that were accepted by magazines like Martha Stewart and Brides Magazine and all these other magazines here in the U.S. and some international as well. But I never gave up. I'm always just continuing to submit my images, and finally, I realized that. Well, I was hoping, I should say, that someone would notice, someone that would help me get to that next level,
Mhm.
and that's how they noticed was because I had so much of my work out there, that finally someone was like, okay, who is this guy? Like, let's get him out. Let's call him up.
It's amazing because like we can hear stories like your first story that you tell and it's like, oh, good. Okay. Well, Jose just, made his break and someone got in touch with him. But, what we don't realize is how relentless you are with showing up, even if someone says no, and then resubmitting and resubmitting. And then a year later, resubmitting and resubmitting. And like, I think so many people want instant gratification, instant success because we believe people have that. But I've never met anyone that's just made their break and like, they've actually just gone to the top magazine, to the top publication, shot the top wedding or anything like that. So talk us through like, obviously when you're first starting out, like there is so many no's, there's so many rejections. And I think so many people get disheartened. A lot of people that I mentor, they say, I've submitted to 5 magazines. They've all said no. I've given up. I don't submit anymore. And that's the end of it. Like, do you feel like there's been times when you've gone like, look, I'm trying to get noticed, but I'm showing up and it's the next year and I'm continue to show up and continue to show up. And do you think your relentlessness of not giving up is one of the big factors of your success?
Oh, absolutely. And the beautiful thing about social media today is that you have that control now. You have the control where I feel like I didn't have that control as much back then. And I sound like I'm 100 years old, but that's the reality. I've been doing this for so long.
That's just 3 years ago. I know.
Yeah, but you have the control, and I always say that your Instagram, or even your Facebook, but I would say Instagram more, is your portfolio. So whether you're photographing and showing personal work, which I think is super important as well, or you're showing your professional wedding work or your portrait work or whatever it is that you're wanting to do, only show what you want in return. And I've realized that, and if you need to go back onto your Instagram from years ago, 2 years, 3 years, and delete images that really aren't your brand today, delete them, get rid of them. You don't need them. And so I've done that numerous times. I'll stop myself and say, I need to go back and delete some images that aren't really my brand anymore. So yes, it does take some time. And I think there's so many younger photographers or young photographers in this industry that wants instant gratification. And the reality is that, and you said this earlier, I mean, it's really rare to find anybody that actually has that instant, success. It does take some time. Give yourself some time. And I'll tell you this, I've always wanted to, as a photographer, it was a goal for me to have people look at my images and identify my images as they were mine. So like there wouldn't need to be any logo at the bottom of the photos, and that was such a huge thing for me. So I needed to make sure to perfect that so that when people saw my images, they knew it was a Jose Villa photo immediately based on maybe the color, the lighting, the composition, etc. So try to get to a point where you have people identifying your work just by looking at it and not by reading who the photo is from.
I actually really want to ask you about this actually, because like, for instance, like ever since I've found your work, I've always been able to recognize your work. But listening to you actually say that you had intention, and then like I've always seen you in the magazines in Martha Stewart and stuff like that. But listening to you now saying this, it was a goal. You had intention. It wasn't an accident. And I think so many of us, we think like, oh, that person's lucky because they got a style that, other people don't have or whatever it is. But actually like you having that intention, and then actually it's the reason why people recognize your work and people recognize your work in those publications.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's part of branding, right? I mean, that's what companies do. And I started to sort of realize like why are these certain companies not in the wedding industry, but why are they so identifiable, or why are they so branded so beautifully? And a lot of it, of course, had to do with number one, consistency, and being able to establish a specific brand, a specific look that you can constantly do, that you can create. Now, sometimes we get stuck in a little rut and you do the thing over and over and over again, but reinvent yourself by, using different equipment or whatever it is, but continue to have that particular brand, that particular look, so that, that is the longevity. Because I think, like for me as a photographer, I came into this industry knowing that I wanted to do this like for forever, like for my life, not just for 5 years, not just for 7 years. Like this was it. There was no other options. I went to photography school, for 3 years. I got my bachelor's, all of that. And I think what makes a big difference in a successful photographer is one that has the longevity. I've been doing this for 18 years. I can probably name only 2 or 3 other photographers, wedding photographers, that are successful, that have been doing this longer than I have. And it's pretty amazing to see, how long some of these people last.
I'm the same. Like I don't actually know many people. I've got like maybe 2 friends that I'm like, oh, like we, sort of started out and we're still doing it together, where everybody else has sort of come and they've gone. I've actually got 2 questions for you here. Like, so when I first started out doing photography, my wedding photography in Melbourne, the style that I was doing, which in Melbourne was like a little bit more darker, moodier, it just wasn't on trend. Like it was so far from the trend, right? And then I pushed so hard to not change how I wanted to shoot, even though it wasn't part of the trend. So I booked a lot less weddings than everybody else that was doing more of the colorful, bright stuff. And so I want to ask you, like, trends come and go and things change all the time. So my style's still the same in 2013. If you look at a wedding, it's pretty much the same thing. I pretty much use my same preset, like everything. But how do you go, like, sometimes like seeing a trend and thinking maybe I should like adapt and pivot towards that trend, or just knowing like in your heart, like, okay, this is the work that I want to create, regardless if it's the most popular thing. And even if it feels like not the right thing, like you're going to keep going through and creating the work that you do.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Now, I mentioned that I'm mostly a film photographer, and I've been in this industry long enough to see so many trends. I was in this when, digital wasn't really a thing, and then digital became a thing. And every friend of mine who was a wedding photographer or portrait photographer, with the exception of one that was shooting film, ran over to digital and started photographing digitally because that was the new thing to do. Back in the year 2000, 1999, and that's not that wasn't me. Actually, I felt like to be honest, I didn't know digital. I didn't want to know digital. I don't like change. What I did is I perfected a specific look within film, and I decided to run with film, knowing that it was the way that I was supposed to be doing things. And luckily, I stuck with film because then it became sort of a trend again. Once digital was in, and then film, came back, and the contact 645 and the medium format and the whole thing. And so I continued to stay with it because to me it wasn't broken. It wasn't broke, so why fix it? Why am I going to do something that is going to be completely different or make my images look a little different than I envision them or how I've already created my brand? So I didn't want to make that change because I just didn't want to, and I felt like I didn't need to. So it's hard for people to.
Did it ever feel like you were like fighting something there? Was there ever a time you're like, man, this is okay. It's hard to keep on my guns, but I'm gonna keep pushing.
Oh yeah, there was moments where I literally was like, "What am I doing? Why?" I was second guessing myself. Why am I spending so much money on film? Why am I doing something that's old school? All the new young brides want digital. Like there were so many things that I just and that came to mind that I was just always second guessing myself. But the beauty is that I started to find this niche, and I started to get these clients that were art directors or actors or people that really know and understand art, other photographers, painters, things like that. And so because of that, I established a market and I continued to stay with it. And luckily, it actually gave me an edge as I was sort of branded to be that film wedding guy. And I even have a book out on it and everything. And so it was probably one of the best moves I've made in my business is to continue to stay true to who I really was and to not be distracted by the noise of digital, which was the new trend back in that day, which I easily could have made that transition, but I decided I just didn't want to do that.
I don't know if you know how much of an impact on the wedding photography community you've had over the years, for years and years and years. But when I first started wedding photography, I went to a really cool workshop with some people that I really looked up to. It was like Jonas Peterson and a bunch of people. And in that workshop, people talked about you at that workshop, and they were talking about like, oh, you need to get a Contact 645. It's the Jose Villa look, like, and you got to shoot Fuji 400, and this is how you do it. And everyone was talking about it, right? And this is when I first started, so I didn't know who you were, but I knew that it's like, oh, okay, someone uses that camera, and then everyone talks about, oh, the camera's really expensive now because Jose Villa made it popular, and then so he's pushed up the prices of the camera. I want to ask you, like, because I believe, like, you are a thought leader, being able to push through this kind of stuff. And how do you feel like people copying you, or do you feel amazed that how many people have like taken on your style, or how many people identify and love your style? Yeah, do you ever feel like people copy you, or do you love that that your style's out to the world?
Yeah, I used to be bothered by it because I it's just things in my head, but early on I thought I was like the only person that did this particular shot and then people would copy it. Come to find out there was already 1,000 other photos of that. So the reality is that you can't be bothered by that, and I can tell you as an artist, it's just naturally a thing, a human instinct to feel like someone's copying you, and that's not the right thing to do. But I see it in a different way now that I've done this for so long. I love to share. That's also why I have workshops. I am formally trained. And so for 3 years when I was in school, we shared work with each other. We partnered up and did assignments together. And we would even emulate famous photographers in our classes at school. And I remember there was one photo of Richard Avedon, of this young boy who might have been 12 years old working in the coal mines. And he photographed it on an 8x10, Richard Avedon, and it was in a book. And I copied / emulated that photo to the T. That was what our assignment was literally to copy another famous photographer. And so of course I did, and I felt like I copied it to the T, and it was amazing. But I think I took offense before, but now I see it as a group effort. I mean, I think it's of course flattering. It's great, but I want people to, if people didn't copy me, or let's say copy, I don't know, that I'm shooting a Contax 645 or whatever. I didn't create it, but if more people do that, the more there is that's out there. The more that's what I love about, like, the film trend is that, and why I pushed film so much. It's allowed for the industry to accept film again. When film was not accepted because it wasn't good enough anymore. When digital became a thing. So I feel like I embrace it, and I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing to just. But I will say, build onto that. Don't just copy exactly, but build onto it. Make it better. I mean, that's what we do as artists. We just. I mean, I can't sit here and say I've never copied a photographer. I've copied Richard Avedon. It was in school, granted, yes, but we just do that as humans, I think, and it's inspiring, to see other photographers creating beautiful work that you want to be creating as well. But I will say, add to that and make that your own, whatever that may be, your lighting, but or your pose or your whatever that is.
I always love seeing the evolution of your own work or of your own anything. Or when my students come and learn from me, they're like, "Oh, so I'm trying to do this thing to keep it the same as Jai." And I'm like, "It's not there to keep the same as me. It's there to do better than me. Like build on what I've done and take it even further." And I think I'm always so proud when I see my work, but then it's evolved into the next step because it's got more minds on it and a new twist, and it's something better than what I could ever originally think of. So I love seeing that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And also, I think as an artist, it actually pushes me, so that I don't feel like I'm in this rut of the same thing. It allows me to go, oh wow, like they created this and made it better. Okay, great. Like because there's so much noise on social media and we get influenced by so many things. It pushes me and it pushes my limits to continue to be competitive, within the younger now generation of photographers whom are incredibly talented, because of the type of equipment, and that is readily available, that is so advanced today than, for example, when I started.
Yes, I love that. So I want to talk about how you are in a same sex relationship right now and in the wedding industry, because in your career, in your lifetime, like, you're talking about in the year 2000 and things like that. Now we're in like 2021. In the US, legalized same sex weddings, things have changed so much. It's progressed so much. And so you've seen so much. I'd love to know, especially early on when you were first starting in this industry, like, was there any hard moments? Is there been any kind of like resistance or things that have kind of like really challenged your beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was always really hard for me. I wasn't one um, that was very out. I grew up in a very Catholic, traditional Mexican background. So, it was something that really was looked or frowned upon. And so, as I started photographing weddings, and I was literally photographing all straight weddings, of course, at that time. It was a thing that, like, I was wanting to create what felt right for me and how I wanted to be photographed in my relationship. I've been with Joel for 17 years, so I've been with him pretty much my whole career. And it's beautiful though how things have changed. I mean, wow, right? Now it's like, I mean, it's definitely like one of those things where I didn't want people to know. I'll be honest with you. Like at the beginning, I didn't want people to know, especially me going into a Catholic church or, being at very religious ceremonies. I just, and it was just all in my head. Like I was just afraid of my own shadow. I just feel like, just being out there and actually just being more myself is definitely, was the best thing that I could have done for myself and for my business. It's funny now, people seek me out because I am in a same-sex marriage, or now they want that, and it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's always best to just be honest with yourself. I mean, that's really the main thing.
We tend to hide ourselves and we tend to hide the things that make us unique, which really we should be leaning into.
I mean, I think that we all have, some sort of thing that bothers us or we're embarrassed about or insecurities and things like that. As an artist, I feel like there's so much of that. I feel like, I've seen so many photographers in these workshops, and I think what so many people lack is confidence, in who we are as artists, and being confident with the images that we put out there, and some people being afraid that they're going to be critiqued in a bad way, and that it's not good enough. And the reality is that you should just be, and I know it's hard, but practice just getting things out there that maybe make you uncomfortable or that make other people uncomfortable. And you'll start to find that brand. You'll start to find those things that really resonate with you, and you'll start to find your clan, like you said. I mean, that's just the way that it is. But I think one of the hardest things that I've learned really is the confidence. So I know so many people, even second shooters, that help me. I have a bunch of them that help me there, and myself. I mean, sometimes I'm not confident in my work or even in my actions myself. Sometimes, like you said, how you dress, whatever, at an event. I mean, we're shooting these events where we have to be dressed very nicely. And it's hard when you're working in 105-degree weather with three cameras on you, and still you have to perform, So and we're all visual. Everything is so visual, so it's hard. But one thing I would say is try to get yourself out of your own head, and also don't be too afraid of your own shadow. And I've learned that myself.